I'm just doing a quick walkthrough of some of the lean validation I did for the context menu prototype. So some quick background, I had 10 usertesting.com results and one internal respondent answer a survey while completing a prototype. And basically the goal was validate the plus pattern for adding new context sources, whether adding inline context tokens was intuitive, and also how well they can complete the workflow using only a keyboard, and then using these insights to iterate on the final version. So one risk with user testing is it does lean towards first impressions. So this is going to be used ultimately in the IDE as a something that's a touch point for developers day in, day out. And so I was trying to find ways to reduce friction whenever possible. And that's something to keep in mind with some of the feedback is it's going to trend towards first impressions. Before we get into it, I'm just going to quickly illustrate the prototype here. So this is option one. The only difference between the two were visual styling. You can see the selection here is very bold with the background selection. And if I were to add a file as an inline context, you can see I have the ability to remove it using an X. It also deletes with the keyboard. So if I were to switch to option two, you can see the selection much more minimal. If I go and try to add a token inline, you can see there is no X, so I need to use my keyboard, put the focus on it, press backspace, delete it. Again, focusing on that keyboard workflow. So all this is in Dovetail. I provided a link in the comment. So some of the feedback, one of the big ones, the plus menu as a trigger and as a symbol was easily understood. No red flags, and this is the big win. This is really what it was about, is this pattern. The rest we can very easily iterate, but this was a big shift over using /include to trigger the menu. Everyone found it intuitive and was positive about it. When we move on to adding a context menu using the mouse, 60% very easy, 40% somewhat easy. There was a slight learning curve around how to close the menu. One suggested that we add a save or done button. I do think that's something that we should probably not do, just because, again, this is a daily driver as part of the developer's IDE. They're going to very quickly learn how to do that, and that additional friction of having to click that each time to confirm a selection is probably going to get annoying and add friction to a user. When adding multiple context sources within the same menu workflow, again, 100% very easy. Users thought it was intuitive, and I think these also are reflected by having first done the first task of adding one menu item. Again, it's a very easy pattern to learn. No real concerns there. When we move on to inline token insertion using just the keyboard, so keyboard-centric workflows, there was a bit of variance. So 72% very easy, 9% somewhat easy, but 18% did find it somewhat difficult. The positive is there was a learning curve, and once users learned it, they appeared to understand it. There was a potential bug for one participant that may have affected feedback, but in general, it's unusual to see such a strong variance. And I think perhaps some of it was around misunderstanding the purpose of an inline token. It's to, as you're writing a prompt, you can reference files directly as part of your prompt, so it's a little bit more logical, but I do think some of that influenced the results here around how to directly insert. I do think it is a low risk because this pattern we have seen in the marketplace already. Deleting the inline tokens. So if you recall option one, it was 81% preferred. So that had the ability to use the mouse as well to remove it, not just keyboard. So I think this was a failed experiment, but it was in the sense that trying to eliminate any visual distractions would help minimize the friction that a repeat developer feels like when they're adding and removing over and over again. I think this is something that could be learned, but I think it's definitely safer for starting to go with option one just because there was such a clear preference. Some users did prefer the blue text color as it helped them identify that it was a file over the more muted, low contrast background. 72% preferred option one, menu design and inline token design. Again, option one was just much more bold. Again, this is something that we can see trending towards first-time users or users who are just doing a one-off test, because the more eye-catching or obvious designs, stronger designs do tend to test better, but I think, again, it's fine to stick with this design, especially for first iterations. There is no real risk there. Overall, 4.64 out of 5. No blocking red flags found, and the plus pattern was understood by all users, so that's a big win. One miscellaneous comment that was interesting was when you're using the search to filter and there's only one item remaining, they suggested that that should just be selected by default. I think there's a way we can even explore this further, but I do think that's definitely something worth considering. We also had internal feedback, not part of the survey, and there were some really great ideas that came out of here. I'm just going to go over it real quick, but one was the ability to hyper-target specific context sources so that you can kind of skip a step and do it even more, so even quicker with less friction. You can imagine using a symbol and targeting a particular context source. I do think this has moderate to high risk, and we wouldn't want to adopt that right away. And we definitely need to align across different teams because especially as we add agentic functionality, we may need some of these symbols for additional shortcuts. So don't want to invest too heavily, I think, at this stage, but definitely a great idea. Another one is using the keyboard to delete any tokens. So not just inline tokens, but also the tokens in the token bar above. So just to show real quick, that would be like this linter error one here. Right now I have to use the mouse, but one user would like to be able to do that with a keyboard. I think that makes a lot of sense. There's a few ways we could do that. Maybe we even integrate them into the input field visually, so it's more obvious that you can navigate there. But I think this is something worth exploring. I think there's low risk, and we should definitely support doing it now. Another is the ability to, again, that search filter thing. When I'm typing, I want to be able to just press enter once it gets to the selection that I have. And I think this is something that we could definitely explore. There's moderate risk in the sense that there's different patterns and ways we could go about it. So it might be worth prototyping before, but I think one other idea was maybe we could just remove the search input when you trigger it using a keyboard workflow. So by typing the plus symbol, do we even really need the search input? You could just start typing and have it filter automatically. Again, lots of different paths we could take here, but definitely this was something that came up a couple times. Another one is bolding the plus in the placeholder text to make it easier to see, and also adding a tooltip to the plus button. Again, another easy one to adopt. So yeah, if you want to see the actual videos, they are in the Dovetail as well as the charts and everything that I already went over. But the next phase will be applying these and posting an update in the issue. So thanks for watching.